Welcome to the California Garden in the month of August. In today's episode, we look at all the harvests we made this month, a tour of the California Garden, some things for you to do this month, and a lot of gardening tips and techniques that will make you a much better gardener. So sit back and enjoy. So let's begin with the harvests we made this month. Beginning with apple. We had just one apple growing on our apple tree, and we were a little late to harvest this apple. So it was kind of mushy, not that good. So just make sure that you harvest your apples on time to get the best fruit. Beans. We were growing our pole bean plant in a container, and the pole beans are a very productive plant. As you can see here, very easy to grow in containers as well. Now I'm not using the best trellis. Pole beans do use a larger trellis, but I just used what I had at that time. But you can see the plant has grown quite well. Beans love the summer season. They actually love the fall and spring season better, but they also grow well in the summer season. And you can see here the beans, they just look quite amazing. Pole beans are very productive. They'll give you a lot more beans compared to bush beans, but they also take up a lot of space. And here you can look at a harvest from just one plant. It looks quite good. Bitter gourd. We had our bitter gourd plant growing between the raised bed trellis, and you can see here beautiful looking bitter gourds. And the bitter gourd plant is actually a very productive plant. You can get a lot of bitter gourds from just one plant. This is just one plant, by the way, that has grown almost all over the trellis. And the taste of bitter gourds is, well, it's debatable. It's a little bit of an acquired taste. Some people just love bitter gourds, some people just hate it. Also called the bitter melon. And you will find bitter melons looking different than this as well. However, I love this kind of bitter melon or bitter gourd. They are quite delicious. And you can see the one that's orange is ready for harvesting of its seeds, which I will show you later. But you can see the bitter gourds here. There are quite a lot of bitter gourds that we got from this plant. And although bitter gourds have different male and female flowers, they do get pollinated very easily for some reason. And you can get a lot of bitter gourds, as you see here, from even just one plant. Bottle gourd. Our bottle gourd plant was growing right next to the bitter gourd plant. And you can see the plant produced a lot of bottle gourds. And these bottle gourds are just huge. Just look at the size of this bottle gourd. Now someone asked me if the bottle gourd is similar to the Oppo squash. And the Oppo squash is very similar in taste to a bottle gourd. However, it's much smaller. So although they are very similar in taste, bottle gourd will give you a lot of vegetable for its size. And you can see here one more long bottle gourd, and these are extremely large bottle gourds. And if you grow them in raised beds and let them run freely on a trellis, you will be getting some really big bottle gourds harvested from your garden. And you can make a lot of things with bottle gourds. There are a lot of recipes online that you can check out. And you can see here we harvested 4 bottle gourds on this one day, and many others on several other days as well. Brussels sprouts. Our Brussels sprouts plant was growing in our raised bed, and we started harvesting the Brussels sprouts one by one, which was quite a tedious process. And then we decided to just remove the entire plant because the plant had grown huge, and this was peak summer season. And you can see the Brussels sprouts here, they look quite good now. They are almost fully mature. And we just removed the whole plant, and you can see how many Brussels sprouts are there on this plant. And some of the ones that we did not harvest are actually very dry. So it's best if you harvest them fresh and use them. That'll give you the best Brussels sprouts that you can harvest from your garden. Moving on to carrots. We were growing the cosmic purple carrots in a container. And these carrots are dark purple in color. They are very unique. They have a very nice taste. And if you're growing vegetables organically at home, don't expect very large sized carrots. These carrots are very decently sized. They are very delicious. They're organically grown. And that's what you need to aim for. These carrots were growing in a potting mix which had a lot of compost, a lot of worm castings. And you can see the results. These carrots are quite good looking. They have formed really nice roots. They're not huge like the grocery store carrots, but you're really not aiming for that. You're aiming for delicious carrots that are full of flavor and something you can easily grow in your home garden. And you can look at our harvest here. These cosmic purple carrots not only look very good, they taste absolutely delicious. Cucamelons. They're very similar to ivy gourd, but these cucamelons, they have a slightly sour taste, which makes them very unique. It makes them a very unique vegetable to eat. And for those of you who have tried this vegetable, you know how nice it tastes. It has a very nice crunchy taste. You can stir fry them with spices and they taste quite good. Now the best thing about the cucamelon plant is that you can harvest a lot of cucamelons from this plant. This is just one plant. It's an annual plant. And you can look at the harvest here. Lots of cucamelons from just one plant. Cucumbers. We were growing the white cucumbers, and this was growing in a container with a little bit of support. And you can see the cucumbers, they look quite good. These are very crunchy, very delicious cucumbers. Now the only thing that we did not do was provide it adequate trellis space. So you can see that there's a little bit of mildew, there's a little bit of insect damage on the leaves, just because there wasn't enough room for the plant to grow. However, the plant still yielded a lot of cucumbers, as you can see. Beautiful looking cucumbers. Eggplants. We were growing the Indian thorned eggplant on our raised beds, and we harvested a lot of eggplants from our raised beds. You can see here the eggplants look beautiful. And they're also very crunchy and delicious and extremely productive. The thorned eggplant was one of the most productive eggplants in our garden, producing a lot of eggplants which we were harvesting almost every day. And they also grow quite large in size, as you can see here, and the plants are still growing and producing eggplants. And you can look at our harvest here. Awesome looking eggplants, very easy to grow and very productive as well. And we were also growing this Indian thorned eggplant in our greenstock planter. And the greenstock classic planter has pockets that are large enough to grow these kind of plants like eggplants. And we were also growing it in a container. So all in all, a lot of plants that we were growing for this Indian thorned eggplant. And we got a decent harvest from almost all plants. Now some of these eggplants can be harvested when they're small as well. They have a nice taste even when they're smaller. And they can be cooked in a different way. You can just cook them whole. Just fill it up with some spices and just shallow fry them. They taste quite good. And you can look at a harvest again. Beautiful looking eggplants. And here are some more on the raised bed. We had this one plant that was planted separate from all the other plants, and it did produce a lot of eggplants. But all in all, we were very happy growing the Indian thorned eggplant, which was extremely productive. The Black Moon eggplant was another variety that we were growing in containers as well as in the raised bed. Now this eggplant produces huge eggplants. The ones in the container are still relatively smaller, but you'll soon see the ones on the raised beds, they are quite big. But you can grow this eggplant variety in both containers as well as in raised beds. And here is the one on the raised bed. Huge eggplant, as you can see. They are way bigger than the Black Beauty eggplant as well. They are extremely similar to the Black Beauty eggplant, but they grow to a larger size. And the Black Moon eggplant is also very delicious. It has a very nice taste. Something that we really enjoyed eating this month. Now look at this eggplant branch. It has almost fallen over due to the weight of the eggplant. This huge eggplant on it. But all in all, the Black Beauty eggplant was a wonderful eggplant to grow. Moving on to the Indian green eggplant. This is the green/white eggplant, which produces small eggplants, as you can see. And these eggplants are also very delicious. Very different from the purple eggplants. And depending on how you cook it, Indian dish or a Thai dish, these eggplants taste very nice. And we had so many eggplants growing on just a couple of plants that we were very happy with our harvest. From just 2 plants, we got a lot of eggplants. Now these eggplants can also add a lot of color to your cooking. As you can see here, the harvest looks quite amazing. And at this stage, you can harvest them and eat them. They're crunchy, nice and delicious. And we are back in just a few days for our second round of harvest. And you can see here some of these eggplants have started turning yellow. And the reason is they're ripening now. And that's perfectly fine. You can still harvest these eggplants when they turn slightly yellow like this. But don't wait too long. This is the perfect time to harvest these beautiful eggplants. Figs. We had our Little Miss Figgy plant that produced some figs this month. The Little Miss Figgy is a dwarf fig plant that can easily be grown in containers. And then we also had our Mission Fig tree. The Mission Fig tree is growing in a container as well, but it does grow into a very large tree. But you can get a lot of figs from this Mission Fig tree, and the figs are quite good in taste. These are some of the most delicious figs I've eaten. And we are back for another round of harvest. As you can see, beautiful looking figs. And this plant produces a lot of figs in the summer season all the way through fall. And you can look at these figs. They are nice, ripe and ready to be eaten. Ivy gourd. We were growing ivy gourd in a container, as you see here. And this container has a nice large trellis, a very sturdy one. And I've shown the technique of creating this trellis in one of my previous videos, so please do check it out. And as you can see, the plant has really taken off in the summer season. Ivy gourd plant, it loves the heat. It grows very well during the summer season. You can see the ivy gourds are quite nice, quite big, and extremely delicious as well. Now you do want to harvest your ivy gourds before they turn red. Once they turn red, they get kind of soft and not so good. And look at the harvest here, beautiful looking ivy gourds. And we were not done because we had ivy gourd plants growing in the raised beds as well. And these are producing a lot of ivy gourds. You can see here the ivy gourds are such an abundant producer. They just need a lot of space to grow. And once they do that, they will give you hundreds and hundreds of ivy gourds that you can harvest. And look at this massive harvest of ivy gourds here. This was one of our biggest harvests. And you can see here beautiful looking ivy gourds. And in just a few more days, there were more to harvest. And these ivy gourds are quite hidden. So you really have to find them and harvest them from the plant. And if you leave them on too long, they do turn red, as I mentioned. They become soft and mushy and they are not really edible after that. So just make sure that you harvest them tender. They're extremely beautiful looking ivy gourds, as you see here, quite large in size as well. Moving on to kohlrabi, also called the German cabbage. This is a beautiful vegetable that you can easily grow in your home garden. We planted some along a container that actually had a few plants growing already. But it doesn't really matter. You can use containers to grow kohlrabi. They don't take up a lot of space. And you can look at the kohlrabi here. Beautiful looking kohlrabi. And all the kohlrabis, they took up such less space that we were quite happy with the amount of kohlrabis we harvested for the space that it used. Now it's perfectly fine for some of the kohlrabis to split if you wait too long to harvest. As you see here, this kohlrabi has split, but it doesn't really matter from a perspective of eating it. They're perfectly edible. And there are a few more around the plant, as you see here. We're harvesting all of these. All of these are beautiful looking kohlrabis. You can see here the harvest, it looks beautiful. And we had another container, another large container that also had a few kohlrabis growing around it. And you can see here they've turned out quite large. And I really don't worry about the insect damage for kohlrabi. The leaves have some holes, doesn't really matter to me. I just eat the kohlrabi itself, the bulb. And you can see here all of these kohlrabis, they've grown quite well, they've become big in size, and this is a stage when you can harvest and eat them. And as you can see here, quite good looking kohlrabis again. And we are not done yet, because we also had kohlrabis growing in the raised bed. And in our raised beds, we had a few kohlrabis, but look at the size of the kohlrabi. The ones that are growing on the raised bed are quite huge compared to the ones in the container, just because they have a lot more room to grow. But you can't really go wrong with growing kohlrabi either in containers or in raised beds. They make an amazing plant that you can grow easily in your home garden. Okra. We were growing the Cajun okra in our green stalk planter, and it's not Cahoon but Cajun. The J is not silent, and thanks to our fellow YouTuber who pointed that out. But this okra variety is quite productive. And you can see here, this is actually growing in the green stalk herb planter or the green stalk leaf planter, which actually has smaller pockets. But it's still big enough to grow okras, as you can see here. And you can look at the harvest here, beautiful looking okras. Moving on to the jambalaya okra. Now the jambalaya okra is quite popular in the south, in places like Louisiana and some other places. But I've noticed that in Southern California they grow okay. They don't grow that great. So the okras themselves are quite good, very delicious okras. However, for the Southern California weather, I think I'll recommend growing other okra varieties. The Nombo Giant is a great okra variety. The Long Indian is also a great variety. But the jambalaya okra still produced a few okras. And again, these were just growing in a container. We had some growing in the raised bed, which we harvested in the previous month. But these are the only okras, the jambalayas that were left in our garden were the ones growing in a container. And once again, good looking okras, not as productive though. The Indian long okra on the other hand was quite a productive variety. And this was growing in a raised bed right next to the ivy gourd plants. And you can look at the okra, they're very tender, they're very soft, and they're very delicious. Unlike the other okra varieties that mature very quickly, they become fibrous and stringy. These okras are quite good because they take a long time to mature. And you can see here the okras look quite good. And there were a few okras being produced by the plant almost every few days. And we kept harvesting the okras. You need to make sure that you stay on top of harvesting okras. Otherwise they become quite fibrous and quite stringy in just a few days. And here is another set of okras that we harvested, and we kept harvesting okras every few days, as I mentioned, from these plants. And August was probably one of the most productive months for harvesting okras. The burgundy or the red okra was another okra variety we were growing. And this okra variety produced very huge plants. I mean, just look at the size of these plants. They're quite big. I did leave a few okras to go to seed, so I could save the seeds for the next year. This is an heirloom okra variety, which means that its seeds are true to the parent. So you can save a few okras to go to seed and then harvest the rest. But just look at this okra. This is so beautiful. These are just amazing okras. They taste very similar to the green okras, but they also have a lot of antioxidants, which means it's good for your health. And once again, the red okra was a variety that was so productive that we were harvesting a few okras every few days. As you see here, beautiful looking okras from just a few plants here. And this is a mix of the green okra and the red okra, just to give you an idea of how beautiful the harvest is. Onions. We were growing onions everywhere in containers as well as in raised beds. This harvest is from the container. You can see that the onions are mature now, mature enough for harvest. Now we could have let them grow for a little bit longer. However, we were harvesting all our onions so that we could cure them, and we had to start using them as well. So even if we are harvesting these onions now, it's going to take us at least about 4 weeks to start using them after they have been cured. You can use them fresh, absolutely, but they just are way better once they are cured. And you can look at our harvest from this one container. These were started from seeds and they're beautiful looking onions. Moving on to our raised beds, we also have onions that were growing in our raised bed. And these were actually grown from sets. If you remember, we planted 42 onions in our green stalk planter. Some of the bulbs that were left were planted in this raised bed. And you can see here, these onions are quite big. They're ready for harvest and ready for curing. So we went ahead and harvested all the onions from our raised bed. And as you can see here, we had quite a lot of onions growing in the raised bed as well. And in our final raised bed next to the ivy gourd plant, we had a lot of onions, and you can see here big onions. These are absolutely huge onions. We had to harvest them. The tops had fallen off, as you can see here, which means they're ready for harvest and ready for curing. And there are just a lot of onions on this raised bed. You can see here we have the yellow onions, we have the white onions as well as the red onions, and we have some torpedo onions as well. The torpedo onions are a little longer. They taste a little different from regular onions. But you can see here we had a lot of onion varieties that were started from seed and were growing in this raised bed. So we ended up harvesting all of them just because the curing process takes time, as I mentioned. And you do want to cure your onions properly. And then once you cure them, they will store well for quite some time. But just look at these onions here. They are quite big onions. And you can see a lot of the worm castings that is still attached to these onions. We had a lot of worm castings in this raised bed. The worm castings enable the plants to uptake all the nutrients. And worm castings is one amendment that I highly recommend that you all add to your raised beds or in-ground planting or even in containers. They do a great job of helping your plant uptake all the nutrients it needs. It has a lot of humus, which is known to be a very useful addition to your soil. So all in all, having rich organic soil like this, rich with worm castings and organic matter, is going to give you the best produce. And these are the torpedo onions. You can see here long onions, very beautiful. And we'll go ahead and harvest the remaining few onions. Now when you're harvesting your onions, you want the leaves to be a little dry and the tops to fall over, at least for a few of the plants, to know when is a good time to harvest. And by just looking at the size of the bulbs, you can see that these onions are very much ready for harvest now. And we had to cure these for a few days. We initially dried them in a tray and we got a few. However, we wanted a better solution to cure these onions. So we made a DIY onion drying rack, just like you see here, and kept it in the garage. You do need a good ventilated space to cure onions, and you can see here after curing them, they look absolutely amazing. These onions will store for quite some time. There are some really big onions here. Moving on to peppers. We were growing bell peppers in our raised bed and containers. You can see here the green bell pepper. It looks quite good. They are decently sized as well. And once again, the peppers will not form large fruits like these unless you have good quality organic matter in your soil, worm castings especially, which help the plants uptake calcium and some other nutrients effectively. So a lot of you who have tried growing peppers and are not getting peppers like you see here, you need to start using worm castings. I think it's a very underrated product. Earthworm castings are one of the best products you can use in your home garden. And you can look at the bell peppers here, quite good looking bell peppers. And we harvested a lot of bell peppers from our raised beds every few days. You can see here we are back for the next round of harvest. And look at the peppers, they look absolutely gorgeous. And we were growing our bell peppers in a container as well. These are the red bell peppers. They start as green but they turn red eventually. And you can look at this harvest, beautiful looking bell peppers. Moving on to the Cajun bell. The Cajun bell is a spicier version of the bell pepper. Once again, it's not Cahoon. The J is not silent, but it's Cajun. The J is spelled on purpose. And these peppers are quite spicy, so great pepper variety to grow in your home garden. Cayenne peppers. We were growing cayenne peppers in our raised bed. This was our self-watering raised bed. And you can see it's loaded with cayenne peppers. Now cayenne peppers are definitely hotter than most other pepper varieties. However, we'll also review another hotter pepper variety, a little bit hotter than cayenne pepper right after this. But the cayenne peppers are one of the most popular peppers. We use it a lot. And this is the other plant right next to it in the self-watering raised bed. So we have a couple of pepper plants and then we have Swiss chard plants between them, all growing in the self-watering raised bed. And they've been doing quite good. You can see how many chili peppers are on this plant. The cayenne peppers are just amazing to look at and very delicious as well. Very spicy. More spicy than your average pepper, as I mentioned. And you can look at the harvest here. This is from our raised bed. We have a couple of plants on the raised bed as well. And you can let these peppers become red. You can use them when they are red as well. They're mostly used green though. But once they turn red, you can dry them. You can make chili powder out of them. There are just a lot of uses of cayenne pepper. And once again, you can see that the plants on the raised beds are also loaded with cayenne peppers. The summer season is one of the best seasons to grow peppers, including cayenne peppers. And we had Italian peppers growing in the raised beds. This is the Carmen Italian pepper, which is a sweet pepper variety. They're not spicy. So the Cajun bell was spicy, the cayenne peppers were spicier, but the bell peppers and the Italian peppers that you see here are not that spicy. And the plants were loaded with these Italian peppers, the Carmen peppers. If you're looking to grow a lot of peppers and get a harvest of a lot of peppers of the Italian type, then you will love these peppers. These peppers taste great on pizza toppings, for example. And you can also use them just like you would use bell peppers. But it's a very productive plant that produced a lot of peppers, and we were quite happy with the amount of peppers that this plant produced. And this is how our harvest looks like. Gorgeous looking peppers that are very easy to grow. Jalapeno peppers. We were growing the early flame jalapenos in our greenstock planter, the classic greenstock planter. And you can see here they've turned red now. These are spicy. So when we started growing these peppers, they didn't seem very spicy. However, later on, all the peppers that we harvested were quite spicy. They were quite hot. And heat is just a relative term, so they were hotter than the bell peppers, probably on the same lines as the cayenne pepper. But you can see here the early flame jalapeno produces a lot of jalapenos. And the classic greenstock planter is excellent to grow this jalapeno variety. We were able to grow quite a lot of plants and harvest quite a lot of jalapenos from just a few plants. And once again, we'll resume the harvest now. And every few days, we were harvesting jalapenos from these plants. You can see here beautiful looking jalapenos. The red hot chili peppers were another variety that I was trying this year, and it turned out quite well. This is another spicy pepper variety. Probably a little spicier than the jalapeno peppers once they turn red. But I really enjoyed eating these peppers. They were quite amazing. The spice level was really good. Spicy peppers, delicious peppers. And you can see the harvest here. Quite good looking as well. Shishito peppers. Now shishito peppers are on the opposite spectrum of being spicy. They are not spicy at all. Very much like green bell peppers, they have no spice and they can literally be eaten raw, grilled or sauteed, and they make a good snack. Now I'm not a big fan of shishito peppers. They were good but not great. Now shishito peppers can be eaten as a snack. However, there are limited uses of shishito peppers. So if you are growing shishito peppers, just make sure that you look up some recipes on how to use them. The Surajmukhi peppers were on the opposite side of the spectrum of being the extremely spicy pepper that we were growing. The most spicy pepper in our garden was this pepper variety. Now this looks like a type of the bird's eye chili pepper, but it's very productive. And this plant produces peppers that are pointing upwards than downwards, and they also turn red and are equally spicy. So the spice level of this pepper, as I mentioned, was one of the highest. But we really enjoyed growing this pepper and eating them. They can be substituted for cayenne pepper in most recipes if you want a little bit of extra spice, extra heat. And as you can see here, beautiful looking peppers. Pluots. One of my favorite fruits to grow this year were pluots. And pluots are a plum apricot combination fruit that are very delicious once they are fully ripe. And you can see here we got so many pluots on this plant. And pluots are not self-pollinating, which means they need other flowers or other plants to pollinate. However, the solution is to have a tree that has multiple grafts. This tree, for example, has 4 grafts. So 4 plants growing in this one rootstock, which really helps with the pollination. And you can see the tree is fully loaded with fruit. Now some of these plants require extremely large chill hours, but that's not really a problem. They will never produce fruit, but they will produce flowers that will pollinate the other varieties that are low chill. For places like Southern California, where you get less than 100 chill hours on most winters, some of these plants will grow very well and produce a lot of fruit, as you can see here. Beautiful looking fruits, absolutely delicious. So pluots is one tree that I highly recommend that if you're in Southern California, please do grow it in your home garden. Just make sure that you get a multi-grafted tree to ensure good pollination between the plants on the same rootstock, and you'll be pleasantly surprised at how nice these fruits taste. You just need to remember that if they're overripe, then the birds will get them, and if you have rodents or other critters in your garden, they will get them. So just make sure that you harvest these on time. Make sure that you're not letting them be overripe on the plant. And there are several pluot varieties. Some of them are red in color, some of them are yellow, as you can see. And they all have very unique taste and very unique flavor. and we harvested each one of these pluots from our tree, and we got quite a lot of pluots. I wasn't really expecting so many pluots in the first season itself. But you can see all these pluots, they're juicy, nice and delicious. Snake gourd. Looking like a snake, these gourds are very interesting. This Naga variety is quite popular. It looks quite good, looks just like a snake. And the word Naga actually means snake or the cobra snake in the Indian language. You can see the gourds here, they look quite nice, quite healthy. And this is also an acquired taste. Not everyone likes to eat snake gourds. And this is the other variety, the serpent variety of snake gourd that looks quite white in color and is quite long. And the reason it's called snake gourd is, as I mentioned, it resembles a snake, very long gourds. And these two varieties are actually the most popular varieties. Most of the homes grow these two varieties, and you can look up some recipes online on how to cook them. But you should definitely try eating snake gourd first, and they are always eaten cooked before you start growing them in your home garden. But if you have eaten snake gourd, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. These are extremely delicious vegetables, and they're not very easy to find in your grocery store. Even if you do get it in the grocery stores, they are usually not that great, they're old, they're not that fresh, not that crispy. But growing them at home gives you absolutely amazing snake gourds. And they're very productive plants as well. These two were growing in a container, and they did produce a lot of snake gourds. And we are back with more harvests. As you can see here, the plant just keeps producing a lot of snake gourds. And you must harvest snake gourds when they're tender. Don't wait for them to become too fibrous unless you're saving them for seeds, because they lose flavor very quickly. So try to harvest snake gourds that are a little immature, a little crispy, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. Now the serpent variety of snake gourd is another variety that is quite popular. It's white in color. And once again, all these snake gourds are called snake gourds because they resemble a snake. And here is how both of them look like side by side, the Naga as well as the serpent. And just look at this one. This actually looks like a snake. Its tail and everything. What do you think? And once again, here's the snake gourd. As you can see here, beautiful looking snake gourd. And there's one more on the top that we will harvest. And this one also looks like a snake that's sitting. Pretty cool, huh? And look at this beautiful snake gourd. And here are all the snake gourds that we harvested side by side, so you can see how they look like. They look like a bunch of snakes sitting in a basket. What do you think? Let me know in the comments box below. Strawberry guavas. Strawberry guavas are one of the tastiest fruits I've grown so far. They have a very nice tropical flavor, which is really hard to describe. It's a very complex tropical flavor. They're very soft. You can just swallow the seeds. They are very soft seeds. And just look at how beautiful they look. So these taste like guavas, and they have a hint of a strawberry flavor. Although I think it's more of a hint of some complex tropical flavors that I really enjoyed. and it produces abundantly. Now, although it's called strawberry guava, it's not really related to the guava family of plants. It does look like guava, it tastes like guavas as well, and I just enjoyed eating a lot of these strawberry guavas right off of the tree. And you can see here, even after the first harvest, this plant is absolutely loaded with strawberry guavas, and they keep ripening over a period of time, which is very helpful so that you can harvest a few every day. And while I've recorded videos of some of the harvests, I was coming into my garden and just eating these strawberry guavas right off of the tree, and they were quite delicious. And this is such an easy plant to grow. It's actually a beautiful ornamental plant as well. It's something that I highly recommend that all of you should try growing in your home garden. You'll be pleasantly surprised at how delicious it tastes. And just look at how beautiful it looks as well. Swiss chard. One of the plants that grows year-round in Southern California. Our Swiss chard plant was growing in our self-watering raised bed, and we harvested a few leaves. And you can see here they are quite big leaves and an excellent substitute for spinach. And spinach is a cool season crop that doesn't grow throughout the year. However, you can grow Swiss chard pretty much throughout the year in Southern California. And it's also very delicious, just like spinach. They have green leaves that can be eaten raw or cooked. We usually cook Swiss chard leaves with lentils and coconut, shredded coconut, and some spices. And they taste absolutely great. And you can look at all these leaves, beautiful looking Swiss chard leaves that we harvested. So if you're struggling to grow vegetables like spinach, Swiss chard is a great alternative. Tomatoes. We had our salsa tomato plant growing in our raised bed. From last year, it was overwintered and it was still producing tomatoes, so we let it grow. However, you can see that the plant is suffering now. It's been a long time in the ground for this plant. We'll be doing the last harvest from this plant till all the tomatoes are gone, and then we'll be replacing this plant. But it did produce quite a lot of good looking tomatoes, as you see here. And the Juliet tomato was also at the end of its life cycle. You can see that it's dried up quite a bit. And we are harvesting all these Juliet tomatoes, which was quite a lot of work to do. So I have my little helper here helping me harvest all these beautiful Juliet tomatoes from the plant. And you can see what an abundant harvest we had. The Raju tomato, a new heirloom tomato variety I was growing this year, was also very productive. This is a determinate tomato plant. It is not resistant to insects or diseases, but produces beautiful looking tomatoes as you see here. And this is quite a productive tomato plant. Initially, it didn't produce a lot of flowers and fruits, but over a period of time, after about a couple of months, I could see a lot of fruits, a lot of tomatoes on this plant. And all in all, the flavor is great. It's a very nice variety. It's a determinate variety, and I will be saving seeds for this variety this season. San Marzano tomatoes were another tomato variety that we were growing in a container, in a whiskey barrel container, and it had grown quite well. Now, San Marzano tomatoes are indeterminate, so it's best to grow them in the ground. However, this was a large container and we did harvest quite a lot of tomatoes from this plant, and we were quite happy with the taste as well. And I know some of you love the San Marzano tomato. So if this variety is one that you like, you should grow it in your home garden. It's just easy to grow. You can see the abundant harvest as well. And the Little Sicily was a patio tomato, a container tomato. That's a part of the Harvest Select series by Bonnie Plants, which is available at your local Home Depot. If you go to Home Depot, you'll have a separate section on this series, the Harvest Select series, and they have quite good plants. And you can see these tomatoes, They grow on a small determinate plant and they produce quite abundantly in just a small container that you see here. And look at the harvest, beautiful looking harvest of this little Sicily tomato. Turnips. We were growing the Milan turnip variety in our raised beds as well as in the containers. And you can see here it's a very interesting looking vegetable. You can see it is purple in color with a white bottom, and they are quite large as well. Now turnips technically can be grown in the cool season. They are a cool season crop, but I did grow it in the summer season and they grew perfectly fine. You can see the harvest, beautiful looking turnips. And we were growing them in a container too, and they're very easy to grow in containers as well. This is the purple top Milan variety, and there were a few turnip varieties that we were growing. All of them did quite well. Now some of your turnips in containers may be smaller than the ones in the raised beds, but that's perfectly fine. These are still good sized and good quality turnips that are very delicious. And the harvest looks quite beautiful. We got quite a lot of turnips from the plants that we planted. Watermelon. We didn't have a lot of watermelon plants growing. We did have a couple, and this is our first watermelon harvest. And you can see here the tendril on the side is dry, and this makes the watermelon ready for harvest. And it also makes a nice sound. When you knock over it, it is quite good. And this is what helps you determine that the watermelon is ready for harvest. And now let's begin with the garden tour. Starting with the raised beds. We have our tomato plants growing in the raised beds that have grown huge but have not produced a lot of fruits. We have the eggplants that are still growing. And the peppers, I think the highlight of this raised bed are the pepper plants. And they have grown quite tall now. I hope to get a few more harvests from these pepper plants before the cooler weather sets in. So we'll see how that goes. You can see here lots of peppers on some of these pepper plants. And we have some space here to plant some more plants. And you have these tomatoes that have not grown that well, as you can see. We also have the pole bean plants that have grown on the trellis. You can see here they've occupied quite a lot of space on the trellis. And on the other side, we have some carrots that are growing. We harvested half of these carrots and half of them are yet to be harvested. We have our tomato plants. As you can see, not very productive though. We just planted some okras. This is the Cajun okra that we had growing in the containers. I was so happy that we planted some more. And we have our bean plants. These are the bush bean plants. They've started to grow now. On the other side, we have our burgundy okra or the red okra. They've grown into quite large plants. I have left a few of these okras to go to seed. And we just planted some cantaloupe or muskmelon plants here in this raised bed. Followed by some cilantro. Cilantro is something that we use a lot. So we planted a few cilantro plants. And then we have this one bush hyacinth bean plant that we will let it go to seed. And some cayenne pepper plants on the back. The trellis, as you can see, has been totally taken over by the bitter gourd plant as well as the bottle gourd plants. You can see one bottle gourd right here. And lots of bitter gourds still growing, as you can see here. And some of these bitter gourds are turning red and yellow and orange. And you can look at the trellis, it's almost like a jungle here. We have our mouse melon plant, the cucamelon or the Mexican sour gherkin. Followed by a couple of pepper plants that we planted a little late on this raised bed. We have the black moon eggplant and the Indian thorned eggplant right next to that. And we also planted some corn plants right here in between. And moving on to the last raised bed, we have our Indian thorned eggplant, still producing a lot of eggplants, as you can see, and the plant has become quite tall. A lot of eggplants hidden here. We have the Lab beans plant right next to it, followed by an invasive sunchokes plant that I was not expecting. Anyways, next to that is the Indian green and white eggplant, followed by some okra. This is the Indian long green okra. And the ivy gourd plant on the back, the ivy gourd or the Tindora plant on the back on the trellis. And that concludes the tour of our raised beds. Let's now move on to the containers. In the first container, we have beans. This is a bush bean plant, followed by some Japanese cucumbers. We have a couple of pepper plants in the corner pot, followed by the Lab beans, which is growing quite big now and has outgrown the trellis. We have some bush bean plants which didn't do that well. The snake gourd plant, which gave us a lot of snake gourds this month. You can see here there are still a couple of snake gourds growing. This is the tomato plant, the Raju tomato plant, that still has a few tomatoes growing on it. We have our pole beans plant that has taken over the trellis completely and is producing a lot of beans, as you see here. We have our sunchokes plant, one sunchoke plant that we planted in the container. We have our hyacinth bean plant that is not doing that well. It's pretty much towards the end of its season, so we may trim it down soon, but we are saving some seeds from this plant first. We have our mint plant that's not doing that great again. It needs to be completely cut down. We have our turmeric plant, along which I've sowed some cilantro seeds. We have some pepper plants, the red hot chili pepper and the bell pepper plant, followed by the San Marzano tomato, which still has a lot of tomatoes growing on it. And then we have the white cucumbers right next to it. Still has a few cucumbers growing, but it's towards the end of its life cycle as well. And we just sowed some radish seeds here, black radish seeds. We have the black moon eggplant here in the next container. The plant looks quite good now. Followed by another snake gourd plant, which has produced a lot of snake gourds, but I'm not seeing any new flowers or any fruit production yet on this. Followed by another bitter gourd plant or the bitter melon plant that has totally taken over this trellis and hopefully produces bitter gourds in the upcoming month. And then we have two containers with spinach. This is the first one. Some spinach seeds that actually were spilled from the last season both grew in these two containers. And the rest of the plants are pretty much the same. We have the lime tree, the curry leaf tree, which is doing good. And on the other side, we have the ivy gourd plant growing in the container. As you saw, we harvested quite a lot of ivy gourds from this plant, and it still has quite a lot left. But beautiful looking ivy gourd plant that's growing well, followed by the pigeon pea plant, which has now taken off completely, and the stems are quite thick, as you can see. And finally, we have our longevity spinach plant, which is doing okay. And that completes the tour of our container garden. And now let's look at some things for you to do in your garden. This is a good time to start seeds for your fall vegetables, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, all your cool season crops, so that they are ready in time for you to plant them once the cooler weather begins. We also sowed some radish seeds here. Our greenhouse does get very hot during the summer season. We've had some extreme temperatures during this month. And the next thing to do is to start saving your seeds. In this particular example, we are looking at the bitter gourd seeds. and this is how they look like. But when you actually get the seeds from the fruit, you can see that they are coated with a red colored substance, almost looks like a dye. And I just take a paper towel, take the seeds, and then try to remove the protective coating very gently. And one technique that has worked for me is to just rub it with my fingers between a paper towel, and you can see here all that red gooey stuff comes out, and you are left with seeds like the one you see here. So overall, it's a very simple process. It just takes time to go through every seed and do this, but you just use a paper towel, just rub it really fast, and you can get some really good seeds out of your bitter gourd plant. And you do this for your other vegetables as well. It's a very easy technique to save seeds for most gourds. And here are all the seeds, these bitter gourd seeds. This is an excellent variety to grow in your home garden, and we'll save these seeds for the next season. So there we have it, folks. That was our August 2021 garden tour episode. If you like this video, do hit that like button. And if you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. If you have a question or comment, post them in the comments box below. We'll see you again soon. Happy gardening.